Hello and welcome to CATSweek. I'm Annalise Poorman. Ellettsville Town Council discussed Bloomington Mayor John Hamilton's local income tax increase proposal during their March 9th meeting. Councilmember William Ellis said Ellettsville does not have fair representation in the decision-making process.
Right now, with a 5-4 majority in the city council, that tax can be levied countywide. So basically, our votes on the town council in Ellettsville do not matter, and the same with the votes on the county council. Now, I don't know about you guys, but none of us have any representation in the city, the ones that live in Ellettsville or live in the unincorporated areas. So one of the things that's been working on is sending a message to the state of Indiana. They're working on some language that would change that a little bit. They're wanting to push it off another couple of years. But this tax will be enacted by then if it's not changed.
Councilmember Scott Oldham said the tax ratification process is the largest issue. He explained voting representation.
And that is a all or nothing vote per the individual member bodies of the Income Tax Board, which again would be the Ellettsville Town Council, the Monroe County Council, and the Bloomington Common Council. Each of the votes, if we were to vote for it, is not 5 votes. Ellettsville has 5 votes determined by the majority of this group. So if 3 of us voted, Ellettsville's 5 votes would go however 3 voted. What is being proposed at the State House now is a little more equitable in the fact that it is 1 vote per representative. So in this case, there would be 1 vote for each of the 5 members here. There'd be 7 votes for each of the members of the Monroe County Council. There'd be 9 votes for each of the City Council. And in total, whatever the majority is of those bodies would then ratify it or not ratify it.
Ellis said the tax increase would heavily affect the poor, especially employees working just over minimum wage.
The average person working a little bit above minimum wage, $10 to $12 an hour, would have to work an extra 3 hours a week to make up for this tax. I don't want to see that to anybody. That's a lot of time away from their family or doing something else.
Councilmember Pamela Samples said the Ellettsville council members need to protect taxpayers. She said lives would be disturbed for people living on Social Security. Ellis said Mayor Hamilton wants the tax increase passed by June. At the March 9th meeting of the Bloomington Plan Commission, planner Jackie Scanlon proposed a site plan for the new 4th Street parking garage.
The proposal is for a 7-story building with roughly 537 vehicle parking spaces and 6,750 square feet of commercial space on the first floor. The proposal also includes some city office space and public restrooms accessible from 4th Street and 60 indoor bicycle parking spaces.
Scanlon said brick would be the primary building material and that concrete decks will be covered with an art installation. She said the garage will include electrical car charging stations and solar panels.
The petitioners are seeking a Park Smart designation, and some of the items that they have identified as those most likely to meet that goal are going to be at least 75% of materials sourced regionally, doing preferred parking for low-emitting and fuel-efficient vehicles, reserving space for alternative fuel vehicles, the natural ventilation that is allowable by the open design of the building, and then, as I mentioned before, some other small features and solar panels on the building to help offset the electricity.
Scanlon said a variance is needed for the garage entrance setback from an intersection, entrance width, and parking space size. Core planning strategist Josh Schism said 50% of the garage's lighting would be motion censored to conserve electricity. He spoke about parking sustainability certifications.
If you're familiar with LEED, LED buildings, this is an offshoot of LEED. It's the LEED for parking garages. So our aim is to achieve the highest certification that we can without driving up the cost associated to get that gold certification, which LEED Platinum is a very expensive undertaking. So we're trying to maximize the point scoring methodology so that we can get a silver. Could we get a gold? I think it would be a reach, but we are going to pursue every point for Park Smart that we can obtain and obtain the highest certification achievable.
Bloomington resident Greg Alexander said an increase in parking will not encourage sustainable transportation. Community member Timothy Clark said the city is building 2 other parking garages and does not need another.
So while the city is preparing to build 2 other parking garages on top of this one, and they're also asking us to support with our tax dollars this incredibly large expenditure and telling us to think down the road. I think down the road in the next 50 years, this is a commitment to 50 more years of fossil fuel infrastructure. That's what it is, right? And we need to be net zero in the entire country by 2040 or 2050 at absolute latest. And this project is saying, look, 50 years down the road, we still want to be using this garage that commits us to gigantic roads, that commits us to very low efficiency with use, that commits us to damaging our pedestrian infrastructure, damaging our biking infrastructure.
Plan Commission member and City Council Representative Susan Sandberg said the garage is necessary as proposed.
As I partake in the arts, which I do quite frequently, I see many of the audiences at Cardinal Stage Productions. They are not younger people. The people who support our theaters and our downtown destinations for the arts are older. I actually was at the theater not too long ago, and a lot of older couples were panting and really struggling because they had to park a lot farther away than they normally do when they have the option to park right across the street in 4th Street. So if we think we are not doing anything negative to our economy and the vitality of our downtown by being extremely short-sighted about the versatility and the diverse nature of the people who live, work, maintain the vitality of our downtown, we're being a little bit, short-sighted doesn't begin to explain it.
Sandberg said it is a replacement and not a new garage. The Plan Commission approved the site plan as presented with appropriate variance requirements. And we'll have more CATSweek after this message.
Let's talk about sex.
What is consent?
And what's not?
Consent is based on choice.
Consent is active, not passive.
Consent is giving permission without feeling pressure.
What is not consent?
Silence.
Passed out.
Intoxicated.
Fear.
It is not consent.
God consent?
Ask.
Sex without consent is a crime. Only yes means yes.
Welcome back to CATSweek. The Bloomington Commission on Sustainability discussed 3 strategic goal working groups during their March 10th meeting. Commissioner Pam Weaver presented the difference between B corporations and benefit corporations for sustainable businesses.
The B Corp is an independent company that has a bunch of hoops you jump through to get their certification. And the benefit corp is something you can file for with the state and doesn't really have any teeth per se. It's just your company saying out loud in a way that you intend to think of sustainable practices.
Weaver said a limited liability company cannot be a benefit corporation and that small businesses face some difficulties.
Like coming up with the paperwork, like making bylaws that reflect how they're supposed to be, or creating an employee handbook, or making a privacy. These things are all required by the B Corp company that gives the certification company. And then the other thing is convincing people why they should take the time to do it.
Weaver said sustainable business groups are considering incentives for small businesses to join the B Corporation. At their March 10th meeting, the Monroe County Council passed a preliminary approval of tax abatement for Ernest Health Incorporated. Bloomington Economic Development Corporation Director Clark Greiner said location of the new hospital would be at the corner of Curry Pike and Highway 46. He said Ernest Health surpasses post-acute care service marks.
Ernest Health is on the first center column there at 77%, national adjusted average, so they exceed national averages there in almost all categories. The one area that they really don't see it is the average length of stay. They're slightly longer, and the reason for that is patient care, because they have a much better patient outcome overall when you look at that. So a little bit of extra time in the hospital makes big differences on the back end of that patient.
Greiner said Ernest Health is in the top 10% for rehabilitation care. He said 110 new jobs and 47 hospital beds would be created. Councilmember Peter Iverson asked County Attorney Jeff Cockerell if 47 beds was enough.
The beds being set at that 10 to 20 bed per 100,000 people, that I think in the actual application was 12 beds to 100,000 people. Right now it's being set at 40 beds. Is that enough to meet need? Do you know currently?
I'm going to go with that we are, if you use the average, I don't know what, other than that average, I don't know if it's currently, it would call probably for more of a 50-bed facility if you use the 12 per 100,000, because you're at just under 500,000. But then there are also other alternatives. I mean, currently, if you need this kind of care, you're going to go to Indianapolis or Evansville to get this kind of care. And so I know that they're building the facility with the thought that it could be expanded in the future.
Cockerell said people will continue to use other hospitals. Greiner said the facility would most commonly provide care for injured senior citizens.
And so one of the reasons why I'd mentioned the 13% of the population of Monroe County is over 65. So there's a higher propensity to use these types of facilities commonly. But yeah, they can treat all types of traumatic brain injuries, spinal cord injuries. So yeah.
Greiner said construction is projected to begin in May 2020 and finish in May 2021. The Monroe County Commissioners approved an approximately 10-acre agricultural rural reserve rezone for 3 Clear Creek Township properties during their March 11th meeting. County Planner Tammy Behrman said the property owner requested the rezone to permit tourist home conversion and that some trees were removed from the property.
During the staff visit, we noted that there were some trees that had been cut down recently. Apparently that was by a previous owner, but we're going to still pursue this as an enforcement case and make sure that that restoration and that vegetation comes back.
Behrman said the enforcement case will ensure communication and a timeline for vegetation restoration. Petitioner Representative Mike Carmen said enforcement was unfair for the current property owner.
The reference to the enforcement action, which I'm going to say I believe is an enforcement terminology, because what we're talking about is enforcement for a condition that was existing at the time the lot was acquired from a prior owner. The tree cutting, with the exception of I think it's 3 trees, dead trees that Gareth removed, one of which was very close to the structure. The other tree removal was done by a prior owner. So we're talking about enforcement against this owner for the acts of a prior owner, which is problematic in my view. But aside from that, they have already retained an arborist who's been out there and knows, made 3 site visits already. He's working on a report, has not issued it yet, is analyzing the trees that were cut, some of it by age and what types of trees, species. Has looked at the revegetation that has already occurred, because some of this tree removal actually goes back several years. It's not recent. It may have been discovered recently, at least by planning, but the fact that a prior owner was removing trees goes back some period of time.
Carmen said proposed tourist property usage is compliant with the surrounding zones. Behrman presented 2 conditions of approval for the rezone.
First one is that they hire a certified arborist to assess the missing trees from the petition site and work with planning staff to create a plan for replacing trees on slopes greater than 12%. And also, second, to confirm that all gray water from the structures are being directed to the septic system, and any visible pipes only are transporting stormwater from those structures.
Behrman said the county health department investigated concerns for gray water being properly stored in property septic systems. And we will have more Cats Week after this message.
I'm at risk of thinking there's just no point in trying.
at risk of looking in the mirror and hating what I see.
I'm at risk of regretting what I do, just to join the crowd.
I'm at risk of being told not to tell. And you would never know it by looking at me.
But with Girls Inc. in my corner,
There for me every day.
Believing in me, showing me what's possible.
I can be strong enough to respect myself and my body.
to say I can rather than I can't,
To say no with no apology.
To be a leader.
to finish school,
To own my future.
To break the cycle.
Girls Inc. believes every girl can succeed. That's why the trained professionals of Girls Inc. are there for our girls every day, supporting, mentoring, and guiding them in a safe, girls-only environment. Building bonds that last for years and change that lasts a lifetime. Girls Inc. gives girls the tools they need to boldly face challenges, to resist peer pressure, to be the first in their families to go to college, to beat the odds. With Girls Inc. in her corner, every girl can be healthy, confident, and resilient. She'll do more than dream about her potential. She'll reach it.
With you in my corner. With you in my corner,
I will not be another statistic.
I will fight for myself.
For my future.
With you in my corner, I will win.
Fuel her fire and she will change the world. Girls Inc. Inspiring all girls to be strong, smart, and bold.
Welcome back to CATSweek. The Bloomington Historic Preservation Commission discussed a redesign to the Kiln Adaptive Reuse petition during their March 12th meeting. The petitioner discussed building design changes.
And so we took the grid of what you would typically see in an industrial building of this era, and we applied it to the storefront at the first floor, and we also brought it through to the upper levels. We let go of, it's good to let go of things during the design process, I think, you don't hold on to it too tight. And we had these voids that we created in the upper levels responding to the pilasters and the corbelling and sort of repeating that pattern. And it seemed to be maybe a little too finicky for what an industrial building might be. And we thought it would be more appropriate to take out those recesses, keep the patterning of the pilasters, but just to make those windows similar to the windows adjacent to those. So you can see here how we still maintain the rhythm of the first level, but it doesn't have the recess like it had before. The storefront facing west now is a store. It's still a storefront material, sort of a black storefront material, but on a grid rather than your typical mall storefront type of patterning.
The petitioner also included a historic light steel rail line, detached C-channel awning, and railing. He said stormwater will drain into an 11th Street storm drain, and ash wood would be utilized for soffits. Commissioner Chris Sturbaum was concerned with the perpetuity of ash wood.
The underside of the soffit is going to be natural ash. Is that? Do I understand that? And my comment would be that it always ages and it always fades and it always does it irregularly. And I wonder if you'd consider staining it toward a graying color so that it, you get ahead of it so it doesn't pop as a bright yellow and then it starts showing stains, then it starts discoloring over time. That if it had you wouldn't lose the wood if you had that already aged look to that wood, in my opinion.
Sturbaum said the soffits would be notable from the ground. The commission unanimously approved the petition. The Bloomington Utilities Service Board approved permission for the Bloomington Housing Authority to seek variances for the Dyer Tank property. City Attorney Chris Wheeler spoke about the variances at the March 12th meeting.
Where a while back we had discussed with this board the idea that we would like to enter into a lease agreement with the Bloomington Housing Authority for them to build a ongoing business concern on the property that we once used as the Dyer Tank property. They would put a daycare service at that property on the first floor, and on the second floor there would be other residential dwelling units on the second floor, I believe. They need to receive use variances from the Board of the Board of Zoning Appeals, and they need our permission to speak on our behalf to get those use variances at that meeting.
Wheeler said the petition will change property zoning to allow for development. And that is all for CATSweek. Thank you for joining us. For CATS and WFHB, I'm Annalise Poorman.